Hey, today I'm on a Zoom call to Coffs Harbour, north of Sydney, New South Wales, Australia, to Paul Daily. Thanks very much for agreeing to talk to us today, Paul. Um,
Thanks for having me,
owner,
Simon.
you're welcome. Owner of Ratings to Win, but also a successful, would you say, professional punter?
Yes, I've been professional since about 2008.
Okay, thanks. Now we've obviously corresponded before we've done the interview, and I've done a bit of research on you. One of the quotes I found from you, hopefully it's a correct quote, was that the mental ups and downs of being a punter are still an ongoing source of torment. So why do you do it?
Look, I think everyone suffers from that, and it's simply just part and parcel of the game, really. I mean, we all have ups and downs, winning runs, losing runs. Sometimes they're extended. Obviously, when you're going very well, you tend to sort of feel a little bit invincible. And when things go poorly, you question yourself, and so that therein lies the torment. So it's just one of the things that we get used to. It's never easy, and it's something that you have to continue to work on and continue to monitor. And the way in which I go about doing that is I simply go back to my past betting records and examine those runs and examine what happened when I came out of those and things corrected themselves. And really, the variance sort of takes care of it. So you never get too cocky in this game.
And you've been tormenting yourself and winning. Winning punter since 1997 and a professional since 2008. Is that right?
Professional since 2008. I was a winning punter prior to that, except not in the professional sense. It was still recreational. I started going to races in 1979. I went with a mate of mine and his dad, and I had no idea. And betting and gambling was very frowned upon in my family. So I had a very small bet. I think it was 50 cents each way, and the horse ran third, and that was pretty much it for me. And so it was a case of then trying to get to the races whenever I could. But I probably only went 3 or 4 times in the next couple of years. And it was in 1982 that I then sort of came across Don Scott's book, but winning the winning way, and that sort of put me on a path to, I suppose, learning a lot more about the game and making plenty of mistakes along the way.
Okay, I just want to just briefly touch on your
Mm.
your early background because you're not from a racing family. You're from a
No.
staunch Catholic family. Um, do you think maybe it's because it was so anti-gambling and racing that you fell in love with it so much?
Oh, look, I think more about the atmosphere and the mayhem, the organised chaos of it all. The racetracks just one got wonderful colour, especially back in those days. I mean, there would have been a couple of hundred bookmakers back then easily between the rails, the paddock and the outer and the ledger. And just looking at all that money change hands and the yelling and the movement, it was all too much. It got me.
Yeah, I can totally understand it. The other side of the world exactly the same with me. But tell us a bit about Don Scott's The Winning Way book. I understand it's quite maths based.
Look, it's probably more process based, I think, than math. I mean, obviously, you've got to be pretty good at arithmetic, I think, to understand odds and fractions, and that's a huge help. And it's just a little bit disappointing, actually, that a lot of the new age don't really sort of understand it. But look, it's more about process, workflows. Obviously, weight ratings were a big part of it. Don was one of the early, I suppose, people that talked about ratings, and class-based or weight-based ratings. They sort of form the basis of how I did things or how I learned how to do the form. Look, it took a lot of years. I remember going to not long after getting the book and putting some rough numbers together. I went to a race meeting and I couldn't believe how generous the bookmakers were about these selections I was backing. And as it turned out, after the races later on, I realised that I hadn't taken the weight of over the limit off the horse. So consequently, I was backing horses that I was getting some good odds about. So, but yeah, look, it was certainly the thing that sort of put me on my direction that I'm on currently.
Were you sort of good at, you sort of gifted at arithmetic and stuff at school? Was that something you liked, maths and problem solving and that like sort of thing?
Problem solving, yes. I wouldn't say I was gifted. I was pretty good at arithmetic, but I sort of practiced hard and worked hard and I suppose got better at it. So yeah, certainly wouldn't say I was gifted at it.
Okay, now I was interested. You, despite being heavily into horse racing by the time you left school, you went to successfully deal currency. Is that sort of gambling without the extra risk, or is it just legal?
Um,
More respectable gambling?
Look, for the investors, yes. I wasn't exposed to that side of it. It was on the sales side of it. So we sold leveraged indemnity contracts. And look, there was obviously a lot more going on behind the scenes that I didn't know about. Look, I really didn't know anything about what I was doing then. It was just a way to earn a living. I suppose, yes, there was a gambling element to it, sure, like all markets.
Would there have been any sort of option to get into horse racing as a profession at the time?
What stemming from the
I mean,
currency and finance side?
when you decided to go into currency and take a sort of proper job in the city or whatever, would there have been an option to sort of work for a bookie or work in bookmaking, or was it never sort of something that never crossed your mind at the time?
Look, it was never really on the radar. I mean, I still tried to get to the races as much as I could, mainly weekends. It was more about developing a career in the finance side. That later led to my own consulting business, where we sort of advised on small mergers and acquisitions, which led on to an insolvency path in my career. And then ultimately, I sold my business back in 2008.
Okay, so you were still going to the races on Saturdays. The betting ring, as you've already talked about, sounds a really vibrant place. Buzzy, a lot of noise, chaos. I mean, did you get to know any of the big players? Were you sort of learning from them, or were you just there soaking it all up?
Look, as a young, late teenager, I owned one suit. Um, I went to the races on a Saturday. I figured that the best place to sort of become known, or at least learn the game, was on the members enclosure, or what we call the members enclosure. So I'd, get a ticket and go there. And I did manage to latch onto one large and successful punter, and I really pestered him constantly. And eventually he sort of gave me the time of day and helped me a lot in terms of understanding the value of inside information, and I was able to sort of get a fair bit of that from him. But but I suppose it was not so much just inside information, but also an understanding of the way in which the market was going to move and the direction it was going to take, and so I learned a lot of patience and timing about when to bet.
Yes, so you were doing your homework, you were doing your weights and all the rest of it, and then you go to the races and speak to these guys. Wasn't there ever the temptation to just think, well, all I've got to do is ask my new professional punting pal, and I don't need to do any work? You were still keen to learn the mechanics.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I was really trying to do was marry up what I could learn with what I came up with, and I found that when the information married up, that I was more successful, or my guesses were better.
So when you taken Don's book and you were sort of doing your weights and everything, when did you start getting into speed figures?
Look, initially I used to maintain race times, or overall race times, only as a guide to track condition. I didn't really think about it in the context of a time rating or a speed rating. And there really wasn't any talk about that when I was going through those class and weight ratings. And I started reading a few books in the 90s, and it sort of captured my interest in regards to time and sectionals and so forth. Not a lot of talk about sectionals then, but certainly overall time figures. And I started sort of putting together some numbers. It took a couple of years to sort of assemble. And what I found was the marriage of both the time, class, and weight was a better combination than what I'd previously used, which was just the class and weight ratings that Scott sort of taught in his books. One of the things that isn't much talked about out of the Don Scott books was his ideas on mapping horses or penalising horses because of a bad map or bonusing horses because of a good map. There's a few pages in the book that really sort of highlighted that as a key aspect, and that sort of resonated with me fairly early. So I sort of went about trying to work out how to put together a speed map. I wasn't very good at it to begin with, but it's something that I continued to work on and develop over time, and it's an absolute integral part of what I do now.
Okay, just go a bit deeper into that. Explain what a speed map is.
So a speed map essentially is a sort of a graphical representation of where you think the horses will settle in an upcoming race. And I suppose what you're looking for is not only the position, but whether or not your horse is going to experience difficulties in getting into that position. Whether it's likely to be caught wide or have to go back from a wide gate or whatever the case may be. But also the map tells you what the pace shape is likely to be. If you understand how fast these horses can actually go up early, then you can start to put some context around what the pace scenario might look like in the race. And that will pretty much tell you, in addition to the positions that they're in, which horses are going to be advantaged and disadvantaged.
Right, so you're trying to anticipate not only the business end of the race, the actual result, but what's going to happen throughout it.
Yeah, and it all comes back to a number. So that adjustment that I make because of a horse's map, both positive and negative, really sort of adjusts the rating figures that I might just have in a raw sense. So I think a big part of my advantage lies in that.
Okay, and you mentioned the art of watching videos. So can you explain about that and what you saw that others didn't?
Look, I think videos are pretty well, certainly not they're relevant, and there is advantage to be gained from it. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort to do it properly, and you've got to have the resources. Otherwise, you're pretty much limited to a smaller jurisdiction, if you like, in terms of what you could actually get through as one person. But I always looked for the less obvious merit in a horse's run. So everyone sees a flashing light and the horse storming home from the back in the field and so forth. But I was looking for other things that perhaps weren't as obvious. One of them being horses that were doing too much work early, for example, or horses that were sort of being restrained unnecessarily early. And so, either using too much energy or conserving too much energy. And they don't necessarily have to win, but they'd be running races better than what they were entitled to, considering the actual shape or the pace shape of the race.
Okay, so is that a polite way of saying spotting ones that weren't quite so busy?
Certainly, for the ones that are being restrained, sure, heavily. So, horses that are sort of put into an unwinnable position, just simply because of the dynamics of the tempo of the race, and also maybe how far they get back from the lead. But also horses that perhaps the timing of the ride is misjudged and or they're attacked, for the lead and they're just doing too much work, or they're working wide on a fast pace, those sorts of things. So, there's lots of them, and they're certainly not proprietary in any way, but it does take a bit of skill to get good at it.
And is it still something that you do heavily?
I don't have to. Unfortunately, I've got a team that does it for me, but we don't write comments like I used to. I used to write comments, shorthand, if you like, about or describing a horse's run. That's no longer the case. It's all about just one simple, when I say simple, one adjustment number. So one number that effectively gets added to the horse's raw performance rating, that attempts to normalise for any in-run advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, thank you.